Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to UNU-EHS Science Talk, a new edition. My name is Zita Sebesvari. I am the Deputy Director of United Nations University Institute for Environment and Human Security. We recently launched a report called Interconnected Disaster Risk Report, Turning Over a New Leaf. And the report explores how a deep change can help us to reduce risk and imagine a better future based on new assumptions and new goals. I'm sitting here today with Professor Dr. Daniel Naujoks. He's a professor at Columbia University in New York. And I would like to explore with him, from the political science perspective, how multilateralism could contribute achieving those deep changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Multilateralism can have a really important role in achieving those very ambitious goals. So the report thinks about inner and outer levers, about really changing deep-rooted belief systems about the role of humans in the planet, in society, about equality between nations, and many other aspects. And one thing is that the United Nations has always been a cradle for developing ideas, for spreading ideas. It's never easy, but in international relations, we have something called the norm cascade. The idea is of the norm cycle, where first you have an emergence of a norm, you have a cascade of a norm, and then internalization of a norm. So here, if the UN or multilateral actors bring together civil society, bring together states, bring together academics and other parts of society, including the private sector and businesses, there is a possibility that through dialogues, through the creation of instruments such as norms, more soft norms or harder norms, and discussions among different people at the global level, but also at the regional and most importantly at the local level, where the UN is working in 165 plus countries all over the world, right? So you can think about how ideas and norm changes can be instigated by UN actors in cooperation with local actors. Here, of course, it's important to understand that hard norms are very hard to achieve these days, but through a combination of global discussions, of bringing scientists and other people who have ideas, who bring indicators to measure ideas, such as happiness, such as indicators valuing forests and other things that the report talks about. The UN and other multilateral forums have actually a role to promote some of these deep-rooted assumptions and ideas that may lead, some may hope, to the fundamental and systemic change that the report hopes we can achieve.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned that it sounded a little bit like a linear process leading to an internalization of a norm. How about rollbacks?
So today, it is very hard to believe in a linear upward movement, everything is going better. We see a huge reservations by political leaders to engage in anything multilateral. We see a shrinking solidarity. We see a lot of challenges to the core norms not going in the right direction, if you think about the messages of the report as the core norm, but in the other direction. So this linear process that I alluded to, the idea of a norm cycle, is never as linear as that. And in the current time, I think it is particularly hard to really think about how we can achieve that in the next 3 years. So what I think this report and the UN as a system can do is to act as a time capsule, to start processes, and when the international environment is better and when we have more domestic support for such things, then we will see, hopefully, maybe, a better implementation of these ideas. But for sure, in the current environment of my country first, it is very hard to imagine that there is a global coalition that tries to push for a re-evaluation of core beliefs about more solidarity, about humility, the opposite we see often. So I believe it is not something that is imminent, but something that the UN system can work towards in a medium-term strategy. And we all know that the current environment, the current context is not static. It will change, and for that moment, I think the report and actions by the many actors that form the multilateral system can actually have an impact.
Thank you so much. This is indeed one of the ideas of the report. The report brings also some of the good examples, and one of those is the Montreal Protocol, which is one of the success stories of multilateralism in the environmental sphere we have. It's about ozone-depleting substances and phasing them out in a way which is binding and supporting also developing countries in that endeavor. How do you see is there hope, so to say, to replicate that success in other spheres such as climate change?
So the Montreal Protocol has so far been an outlier for multilateral governance. As you rightly said, it is a success story. It's one of the very few clear success stories. There are many success stories, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, even the Paris Agreement. There are many agreements that can be hailed as success stories in one way or another. But what is harder to put your finger on is impact. Clear, linear impact. And the Montreal Protocol had that. The special feature of the Montreal Protocol, what is an internationally binding agreement, that only became functional the moment a critical mass of countries have ratified the agreement. In that moment, it became binding and it restricted trade to non-conforming parties. So it had an internal mechanism that once it was in effect, it was the rational expectation of each country to actually abide by it. The classic way how international law works is either you have no enforcement mechanism, you have voluntary contributions such as the Paris Agreement, or you have a court-like structure, a committee, something which then top-down decides whether a country is in compliance or not with a certain norm. But these systems are highly flawed because often you need another country to create a state complaint procedure, or it is the international naming and shaming if your ambitions are not high enough. The Paris Agreement is a good case in point, which is not as ambitious and it is not binding. So in order to come together for something like the Montreal Protocol, we first need a common understanding about the threat. The Montreal Protocol was born out of the common understanding that the ozone layer and the shrinking ozone layer, the hole in the ozone layer, is a threat to humanity, to all of us. And that led to many countries actually being active. We need to, again, have this collective understanding that our collective action problem, that we need to act together. And we need to overcome the current fear of international commitments. As a matter of fact, the Montreal Protocol was only effective because 197 parties in the world ratified the agreement. It was the entire world. And many problems we have today, we need the entire world or large chunks of polluters of whatever area you look at need to adopt a certain area. And it needs to be binding because otherwise there are domestic pressures, economic pressure, others to not have that. So in the current moment, I am hesitant that we can reach something like the Montreal Protocol, unfortunately. But I do believe that if we understand that the threat assessment, which you could have today, but it is not the way we are looking at some of these major problems in the world, plus a commitment to together we can do it, and no state alone can achieve those things. These are the core beliefs that need to change in international leadership. If we have that, and we can make it clear to domestic populations that the international community actually can help. It is not infringement on sovereignty. It is actually helping us together collectively to cope with these larger issues. Then I think the moment is ripe for having a similar binding and impactful agreement. But we all need to work hard to actually create this awareness at the local level and at the level of leaders in many countries in the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you. UNU-EHS is indeed working along those lines. If you are interested in more science talks, please check out our social media channels.